Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. How's New Year's?
Sorry?
How's your New Year's?
Yeah, good. Yeah, it was nice. It's funny, I ended up in the city, which I have never done ever. I don't know, like, this reminds me why I don't end up in the city on New Year's.
Nice.
How about yourself?
That was good. I was at a house party, so stayed awake till like midnight and then was pretty much ready to go to bed straight after that. So, yeah, it was good. Is there anything specific you want to cover today?
Nothing specific, no.
Just copy the link into the group. What's going on in your life at the moment?
Well, I've got some clarity around a few things that I was procrastinating on.
Such as?
Just my decision about whether or not to take on that full-time job or just keep developing my business.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that, I need to keep working on my business. So I just need to book in to have a chat with my boss to let him know that that's what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Other thing as well, just around having the kids in a couple of weeks' time. There's a bit of confusion around that, but I made some moves to resolve that, which was good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What was the switch that stopped the procrastinating around those things?
It's going to sound really funny, but last night I went to bed and I did my gratitude and I just said, thank you for my clarity. And it seemed to just all come today. I was like, oh, I actually can see a path forward. That's really cool. I was like, awesome. Yeah.
I would have thought, right?
Yeah, happy.
Hey, Brooksy, Happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Oh,
Only one in the office, mate.
only one in the office, my man.
Getting it done.
New client this morning. Boom, boom, boom.
Killing it.
I think I've quadrupled my January already based on last year's numbers.
Awesome.
Kicking goals.
Kicking goals. How's everyone else?
Good.
Amazing. Kicking goals. You know how it is.
I do know.
What's going on in the world of Brooke other than kicking goals?
What's going on in the world of Brooke? Just been, had a good Christmas. A really good Christmas. Good New Year. Had Sarah's cousin over from the UK and her partner, so they've been staying with us, which has been good. We went to Noosa. It's good. Had a good few days between Christmas. It was nice and chilled. And then back in the game.
Is there anything specific you want to work on, Brooke?
Nothing.
And if you had to give something, what would that something be?
Nah, everything.
And if you had to be specific, what would that specific thing be?
What's that? You cut out there?
And if you had to be specific about one thing, what would that one thing be?
Got no idea what this is, but still struggling with the whole job thing and life thing, and it's come up a lot over the break. And but probably the biggest one is the since we spoke last time, the little kid coming out that needs all the attention. It's come out a lot,
Mm-hmm.
especially when now that I can see it coming up here, there, and everywhere, and there's been a lot of cleaning and forgiveness there, but like having Sarah's cousin here and that, and just being aware of it has probably been the scariest thing because I can see it now and like I can even see it when her cousin's here and like taking Sarah's time up, you know, like I've never been that person that gets like that. Well, I obviously have, but now I can see it. Yeah, I don't know what it is.
So, what's occurring?
Like frustration.
Mm.
Like going back to just I suppose
Give me with a specific example.
like it's always like it's me, it's not her obviously, but it's like I'm going back to that whole like, you know, we've set a vision of having kids and having all this, and like she's a bit more vulnerable now, and we talk about open stuff, but then like her cousins come, and her cousin's like full old English style, doesn't talk about nothing. Sarah's just gone back to this like like to fit in with her, and I just found it really frustrating, like saying things when we're having a drink, like because her cousin doesn't really want to have kids now and all that, and then Sarah's like, oh yeah, nah. You know, I'm not sure if I'm open to it either. Well, I'm sitting there just going like, what the fuck? So the new little kids come out and go like, well, your cousin can piss off because I want the other Sarah back. But I know that it's not Sarah, it's me, right? So then the little kid came out on New Year's because I haven't really been drinking, but then I had a few drinks on New Year's and then just like, yeah, like threatened to like walk out and shit. And it was really silly. But yeah, the little kid having a tantrum.
And why is that coming up?
Well, it was all a build up of that stuff, like just through the whole Christmas break was just all those little things, and I probably switched off a little bit, and then yeah, that's what happened on New Year's.
Mm.
And all I see is a little kid, like ever since we had that talk, it's just like, oh, there he is.
Mm. What kind of little kid is it though?
He's a bit angry. I've never really identified myself as angry, but yeah, he's a bit angry.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like spiral again, you know, like it's like I've hit another point, and it's like frustration of, you know, we say we're in on the same vision and the same plane going into the year, and then I hear all this stuff, and I'm like, the fuck is going on? And then I get a bit angry and frustrated. And then obviously, yeah, react in that way.
Mm-hmm. Why do you react like that?
Well, if I knew, I wouldn't do it.
Well, you do know, and you still do it because you're aware that you're being the inner child, but you're still doing it, right?
Yeah. Well, like I've tried, like I've been doing a lot of forgiving of it and stuff, but yeah, I'm probably just a bit lost in what to do with it, to do with the awareness.
Mm-hmm. So ultimately, when we look at like inner child mechanisms, we can have multiple different expressions of inner child based on the inner child that hasn't had completion within us.
Yep.
So if we have incomplete experiences or stories or virtual realities that we create around our childhood experience, well, then that consistently comes up and we revert back to that behavior.
Mm.
So then the the rebellious little angry inner child then comes out in those instances, because there's an element of incompletion or lack of healing in those areas.
Yeah.
So what's that incompletion for you? What about you, Jess? What comes up in terms of when you think about your inner child?
My inner child is that child, like, not good enough, people pleasing, wanting approval, needing a love and affection.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And when does that show up for you?
When I face when I feel really doubtful about what way to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, faced with big decisions or situations where I feel like I'm going to potentially upset someone.
Want to please people again, eh?
Yep.
That old chestnut. Does that happen for you, Brooke?
Is that even a question? Keep everyone happy, mate. Everyone's got to love Brooksy, and he's got to be needed, mate.
Yeah. So who needs to be needed? Is that you?
No, well, yeah, probably the ego.
Mm-hmm.
Need some ego death.
So when we think about that, we think about ego just being our survival mechanism, which then becomes our universal archetypes. So ego shows up in one of these 4 ways, right? Have you been through the recordings where we talked about these, Jess?
Yep.
Cool. So ultimately, the child is just one of those expressions. So instantly, then the saboteur starts to show up, or the victim of the other person's actions shows up. And then you start to sell out on the things you ultimately want to create. So can you see how all 4 of those occurred on New Year's then, Brooke?
Yeah.
And then can you see, Jess, in terms of making life choices, how that shows up as well for all of them?
Mm.
So the reality is we consistently come up against these 4 throughout our life, consistently again and again and again. Being aware of that becomes the first step for us to be able to then step into the other archetype. So what are our other archetypes? What's the higher level of the child?
Did we go through it on that course, though?
Yeah.
It's not the energies, is it? It's
not the what?
No, I was talking about the energy of the. That's not the same.
The adult can always be an adult, right?
Yeah. The victor. Oh, that's the one you left us hanging on, wasn't it? Wasn't it the line? Yeah.
So aligned can be the aligned doer, can be the aligned creator.
prostitute was the provider.
So when we think about these, like, we can still work if we're in alignment. We can still create and do things if we're in alignment here. If we're sabotaging, then we're doing behaviors which are not aligned with what we're looking at creating. We're being a prostitute, we're selling out to provide for people, but we're selling out when we're doing it. So let's do inner child stuff. Let's see what we got here. The reality is all four of these are just survival archetypes. And when they're survival archetypes, then what do? We survive. And the reality is when you heal the little boy or the little girl, well, then you start to show up as the adult version. So if that consistently is coming up over and over and over again, that means that that becomes your go-to archetype here. Means that this becomes the entry point. Now, we do quite a bit of work already on the victim here by creating the concept of taking responsibility. There are other ways that we can start to step out of that as well. The victor is the primary way where we can start to look at doing that. What we want to look at is, what is your relationship with your inner child? Because in your stories, you made your inner child wrong.
Mm.
Well, the inner child's just someone that's just rebelling because it hasn't been getting the love, hasn't experienced the love, or it's blocked the love in terms of some story or virtual reality that you've created in terms of your upbringing. So what hasn't been healed in that experience yet? What are you holding on to that you're making yourself right about throughout your childhood, that you're not good enough, that you can't be loved, that you need to please? Where's that showing up for you? And where's the predominant trigger that we have throughout our childhood?
Appearance.
Yep. Why?
Well, I don't know, 'cause they
We filter every single relationship that we have with, like, men through our dads, through our relationship with our dad. That becomes the lens at which we see men, because it's the first experience that we have of a man. Now, whether we actually have, like, a dad, like, even if our dad has died, then that still becomes our first experience of that man. Same thing with our mum and females. And often people will look for similar people to their parents to be in relationships with. Especially if that person is no longer alive.
I'll see where we're going here.
See? Where are we going? Where are we going, Brooke?
Yeah, it's pretty funny that.
It is, isn't it? What shows up for you in that, Jess?
Mm.
Yeah, I can see that.
In what way?
I've always been really close to my dad.
Mm.
So, yeah, I can see similarities.
Mm-hmm. Got any examples of that?
I've always been really drawn to, like my dad's got a really wicked sense of humor. He's really like a bit of a prankster and stuff. Both like my partners or my long-term partners have always been playful and like done the same sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how have those relationships gone?
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, good.
Are relationships something that you want to not complain about, or they're just good? Or do they want to be fucking awesome? Yeah.
You know me, understatement.
You can get excited about your life if you really want.
I am just quite excited.
What's your relationship with your mum like, Jess?
That's a bit more tumultuous. So yeah, she left when I was like 15, about to go into my upper years of high school after promising me she wouldn't go anywhere. So yeah, like we've talked now, like sort of all kind of water under the bridge, but that was a big thing for me when I was younger.
Cool. Guess we're going to talk about everyone's mums today then, eh?
Oh, maybe I should.
Sounds good.
Where to begin? So why did your mum leave, Jess?
She was in a relationship with a guy, and essentially he moved about 5 hours away from where we were living. So she followed him.
Mm-hmm.
And I could have gone, but as I said, I was about to go into year 11 and 12, and I didn't feel like it would have been the best decision to relocate schools.
Mm-hmm.
So I stayed with my dad, and my sister went with my mum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what was the impact of that?
I used to have to travel an hour and a half to school every day and an hour and a half home because Dad lived a fair way away from where I went to high school. And for quite a while, my mum and I didn't talk properly.
Mm-hmm.
So months without talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So how much of that is story?
How much about his story? Well, all of it. Now.
Mm-hmm. So what happened?
My mum moved away, or I chose to stay where I was.
Mm-hmm. And why did she move away?
Because she chose to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how did that make you feel?
Abandoned.
Mm-hmm. And how much is that story? Did I say that right? How much of that is story?
How much about the story? less than last time. Still a version of what happened.
So what happened?
My mum chose to move away.
Well, choosing is still story even.
Mm.
Because what happened is she just moved away.
Yeah.
What's the story that you created?
Yeah.
Well, the end point is you were abandoned and she broke a promise to you.
Yeah.
Have you had a conversation with her about that?
Yeah.
How did that go?
Good.
She was good again.
Well, we talk
Maybe. Yeah, maybe you've been hanging around me too much. I say good all the time, don't I?
Yes.
Not anymore. So, what was the result of that conversation?
The result of that conversation was that I was able to see things more from my mum's perspective, and I became aware of a lot of the guilt that she was harboring for all of those decisions and stuff at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, like I sort of understood her more as a peer later on, which was really, really nice.
And what are you holding on to in terms of that?
What am I holding on to in terms of that? Probably some abandonment issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what do you get out of having abandonment issues?
What do I get out of them? Like, how do they serve me?
Mm.
They don't serve me.
They do, because you win the games that you're playing. So if you're playing that game, you're getting a payoff from it.
Yeah.
What's the payoff that you're getting?
I get to be a victim.
Mm-hmm. What else?
Not sure.
Mm-hmm. So have you unconditionally forgiven her for that yet?
Probably not, actually. I'm very cynical.
That was a very long pause. That's a no.
Yeah.
The whole point is you hold on to that because then you get to make her wrong for breaking a promise, for leaving, for abandoning you. You get to be right about the story that you've created around that.
I think a lot of it also comes down to the relationship dynamic I see for my mum reoccurring all the time.
Which is?
She ends up in these relationships where I perceive that her partner doesn't value her and takes advantage of her, which is what happened then.
Mm-hmm. Which
so
is still story.
It is a story. I'm aware of that. It's just, yeah, I think I just actively seek that out in everybody else that she's been with since.
So what's that got to do with you?
Maybe it is still a bit of that victim mentality, that idea of that she left me for someone that did that to her. I'm not sure.
Is that just another story? So what happened?
My mum moved away.
Mm-hmm. And anything else?
She had a relationship.
Mm-hmm. And?
That relationship ended.
And
Now she's in another relationship.
is your mum happy?
No.
Why not?
The relationship.
The relationship with who?
Herself.
Mm-hmm. And how can you impact that?
I can't really.
Interesting. So backtrack a bit. You don't unconditionally forgive her, right?
No.
Do you think she feels that?
Yes.
Do you think that she feels conditionally loved then?
Yes.
And if someone's conditionally loved, what does that create? Does it create abundance of love or a scarcity of love?
Yes.
And I'll only love you if, well, that creates a fear around it as well.
Mm.
And how does that show up in your relationship, Brooke? I'm only lovable if I provide for this family and I'm the man of this house.
Yeah, I feel like it's a challenge of male energy in the house.
And the key point here is who creates that?
Oh, probably me.
Brooksy does. You see, it comes back to the relationship with yourself, your need to provide. Your need to be the man. Which again, it's a story. Because then it's like, oh, let's get this yardstick and measure my success by how much of a provider I am for this family. Which means you instantly create a capacity for, well, if that doesn't measure up at that point, well, then you don't feel that way, do you? Which is just conditional. I can only receive love if. I can only give love if you do this. It's the same thing. You can give love conditionally to a parent, to a partner. You can receive love conditionally from a parent, from a partner. That all comes from you. Your ability to give and receive, create that receptivity to consistently give unconditionally, receive unconditionally. The condition only comes from you. You're the one who creates that it's conditional. You're the one who buys into that story. So then when we go back to that, Jess, knowing that you currently have become recently aware that you conditionally love your mum, because every single person says, oh, I unconditionally love someone until it's brought into their awareness what unconditional love really is. Because the same thing with Brooke, it's like Brooke unconditionally loves Sarah, except when he gets triggered by her. Except when she does this. except when she does that. And then boom, we're into conditional love. So when we think about that with your mum, Jess, the capacity for her to begin to show up in her other relationships can be facilitated by you creating unconditional love for her. Because if you're giving conditional love, that means that chances are you're only receiving conditional love from her as well.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, thanks, Mom, but I'm only going to take on this amount of love from you. Which is what we all do with our parents. It's just like, oh yeah, I want to connect with them, I want to have a deeper relationship with them, but here's the long list of things that they did or didn't do, which I'm going to hold on to. I'm going to carry it around with me, and whenever they do something, I'm going to be like, yep, love you, but this, you left here, you broke a promise here, you did this here, you didn't do this over here. We hold on to that. We drag that around with us. When we create in ourselves that we consciously choose to let go of those lists and embrace unconditional love of those people who are most important to us, we allow them to experience what unconditional love is. Which is rare. And when they experience that, well, then they can begin to actually show up in their higher self rather than showing up in their own little child and their own archetypes. Just the same as the drama triangle. If you're in the triangle, you pull other people into the triangle. If you're in your archetypes, you pull other people into their archetypes, their version of it. If you're aware of that and you know, well, how can I step out of all of my archetypes? Well, I can do that from a place of creating unconditional love. It's not the one I was looking for. Oh, nailed it. Didn't even select that slide properly. Ultimately, it comes back to creating unconditional love and acceptance of yourself, so that becomes an expression of who you are, warts and all. Or as I like to put it now, teeth and all. For years, I fucking hated this tooth right here. Uneven, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Show me teeth, Jess. Yeah? Do you love your teeth?
I do now.
You do now.
But yeah, I used to hate them. Had fangs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, when you get to the point of loving yourself and all parts of you, including all of your archetypes, unconditionally, and accept those things unconditionally, well, then you just show up. You don't show up in an archetype. You step out of those archetypes. And when those archetypes show up, you love that that archetype has shown up, and you can actually accept that archetype for what it is, knowing that it's just a survival mechanism. And you choose to step out of that rather than bouncing from archetype to archetype, rather than going from the child to the victim to the saboteur to the prostitute. You can step into one, you can notice it, you can unconditionally love and accept that that has shown up and in that instance. And when you love the child, then the adult starts to show up. When you heal the boy, the man shows up. When you heal the girl, the woman shows up. When you heal the victim, then the victor shows up. When you heal the saboteur, the aligned creator shows up. When you heal the prostitute, the aligned provider starts to show up. And you go from being in the shadow to stepping into the gift of those things. When you love the shadow, you begin to step into the gift. Yep, that's a write it downer. The reality is all of these archetypes are just different parts of you. The child is just a part of you that hasn't experienced the completion of its experience. Keeps showing up because it hasn't been healed. There's an element there where you believe it's broken, that it needs fixing. And it looks like I've frozen, so I'll just keep talking. And I don't need to fix it, because then that just becomes perfect, whole, and complete, and I can unconditionally love and accept that. And when you can unconditionally love and accept that, then you begin to actually experience the experience of unconditional love, the lovingness of life. And when you begin to experience that in yourself, then you can actually experience that with other people, and other people then can begin to step into that. Did my screen update?
You haven't.
Yeah.
Greenhouse.
Awesome. And when we think about unconditional love, that is what we call joy. And this is where healing occurs. That was in quotation marks. Healing occurs from unconditional love, where other people then start to experience you in that state, that their state starts to then raise. That becomes the point where people start to become imprinted by your frequency and gain the capacity to be able to move past their own shadows. They don't do that when you're anywhere below that, even if you're in conditional love of 500 up here. Anything below that, and it doesn't happen. So if you show up in your relationship from a place of unconditional love, you begin to actually show up in a space of creating that relationship being what it truly can be, rather than it coming from a place of distortion, rather than it coming from a place of story, rather than it coming from a place of all of these memories that you're holding on to, all of this stress and upset that you've created, which is ultimately just a story. It's not actually what happened. Can you see me again now?
Yep.
You're back.
Woo! Gave it a bit of unconditional love, eh? That's all it needs. The point is, something's not where you want it to be, means that you're bringing a low level of frequency to it. It's as simple as that. You've got the desire or the craving for something to be a certain way. You've got the desire for your mum to make better relationship choices, Jess. You've got the desire for Sarah to be more supportive and trusting of you, Brooke. The whole point is when you're in desire, you're actually pushing away that. Because you're creating an energetic frequency of actually and anchoring to that point. When you begin to bring a level of unconditional love to that experience, to that relationship, well, that means that you start to experience that relationship differently. You start to begin to experience that person for who they are, not for who you wish they were. You begin to just experience that person. You begin to just experience that person. You experience the love of that person unconditionally. You begin to create the capacity to be able to receive even more love from that person. Because as you give that unconditional love to them, their capacity to be able to give love themselves increases. And what we can notice is how quickly do we go back into story? How quickly do we go, all right, yeah, but Sarah did this. Yeah, but you don't know what she's like. You don't know what it was like when she left. Well, that's all just story. You've collapsed what happened with the story, which means that you're in the emotion of it. You're in the pain, you're in the suffering. The reality is the pain, the suffering never actually happened. You created a story. You created a virtual reality. You created an experience which was self-created. And when it's self-created, how quick is it to disappear? We know that any emotion that we have is only ever a story. It's not us. Are you your emotions? Brooke, are you your emotions?
No.
Why not? Jess, are you your emotions?
No, I'm not.
Why not?
Because I can observe them.
Mm-hmm. So what are you?
I'm just human. And the emotions are the feeling of the experience.
What is that? Are we the voice in our head?
No.
Well, if we're not the voice in our head because we can observe it, well, are we our feelings if we can observe our feelings? So who are we? What's our identity? Well, we are the observer. We're the observer of our feelings. We're the observer of our emotions. We're the observer of our voice, which makes up our archetypes. And when we become the observer, is there any emotion that is us? And what if we could become the observer of the observer? Who would we be then?
Source.
Could be. We could be consciousness, because we're conscious that we're conscious of observing. You see, if I lose my hand, do I still have an identity? Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm not my hand. So if I lose any part of my body, including my whole body, well, what's left? The observer, consciousness, the capacity to observe those things. Because if I lose my hand, well, I still have the capacity to observe that I had a hand and then I lost it. The point is, we collapse ourselves with the story. When we're in the story, we're in the emotion of it. Emotions are just something that we observe. They are not us. When we collapse that they are us, then we have no power. We're powerless. When we are aware that we are not our emotions, that our emotions are just our emotional response to the story that we've created, that it never happened, then we can separate that, disappear the emotion, disappear the story. Then we can begin to create a possibility that we want to create. So that the story, the emotion, the feelings are something that we consciously create rather than unconsciously create. Then we can begin to show up being powerful compared to powerless here. When we collapse a concept, when two things become collapsed, we lose power. When we see our feelings or our emotion as who we are, collapse of power. Those are two different things. When we create the separation when we can observe that they're two different things, we can disappear one of them and we're only remained with what happened or who observed what happened. How many collapses have we been through? Let's see if we've gone through all of these ones. Responsibility versus blame. We collapse those two, we lose power. Separate, become powerful. What happened? The story. Forgiveness and condoning. You see, people don't let go because they believe it's condoning. You see, by you not unconditionally forgiving your mum, Jess, you're the one who is impacted by that more than she is. That's you drinking poison and expecting her to die. Because you think that by forgiving, you agree with her behavior. That's condoning. People do fucked up shit. Condoning is completely different. Forgiving is you letting go of it. Separate the two. Know what forgiveness is and choose it. Behavior and identity. Sarah is not her behavior. That's not who she is. That's just her having a collapse of different things with the need to please the person that she's with, which is what you do, which is why you are triggered by it as well. The only reason why it triggered you is because you know that you do that as well.
Mm.
The voice is not who we are. Our feelings are not who we are. Our emotion is not who we are. We are only the observer. We are only consciousness. We collapse integrity with morality. We think it's a moral issue. It's a workability issue. Breaking your integrity doesn't mean you're a good or a bad person. It just means that you start to lose the listening of people. That's the impact of it.
You what?
You lose the listening of people because they no longer trust you because you don't keep your word. It doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you just someone that they don't trust because you don't keep your word. That's not a good thing or a bad thing. That's not moral. It's a workability issue. You want to work, you want things to work, well then keep your word. It's as simple as that. If you want people to trust you, keep your word. It's as simple as that. Your word is your integrity is a function of trust. Authenticity and morality. You think it's moral to be authentic and immoral to be inauthentic, when the reality is everyone is inauthentic every single day. Again, it's our power to connect. You can choose to be authentic and connect, or you can choose to be inauthentic and put on an act. You can see it as a game, or you can see it as you being a winner or a loser. You can collapse empathy with sympathy. You collapse those two things, you have a breakdown of power. You can collapse vulnerability with weakness. Again, collapse of power that you buy into. You can collapse being selfish versus self-centered. All of these things you buy into and see them as the same, so you have a breakdown of power. That's like just 10. Sure, we can name more. The whole point is these are all just areas where you've lost power in your life that we start to get back for you. The reality is, in any of these instances, understanding what actually happened. What's the story that I've created? or if I collapse that and lost my power, then I can separate the story, know that the story never happened, and then create a possibility for what I actually want to create in my life. Imagine if you created the possibility of unconditional love. Then whatever happened in your life would show up as a story of it being a loving experience. Then you would experience the lovingness of life. Then any time that your partner was a specific way, or your mother or your father was a specific way, that would only ever be an expression of their love, expression of how they are loving, and how you can actually receive that lovingness. What do you take out of that, Jess?
Kind of hung up on the integrity versus morality in myself at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
What's morality?
What's morality?
Yep.
Right or wrong?
Yep. And what's integrity?
Keeping your word.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're the same thing.
Yeah, I feel like keeping your word is right.
But then you have the collapse of it. Then you create judgment of yourself anytime that you break your word. Then you create shame or guilt around you holding your word or breaking your word. When the reality is, if you keep your word, that creates a listening of people. If you don't, that doesn't. It's just an impact. It's neither right or wrong. You get to choose.
Yeah.
You see, you get something out of creating, well, I'm not good enough because I broke my word. And here's the thing. Where's that come from? Who broke your word to you about moving?
Yeah, my mum.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
Ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
All it takes is the separation and knowing that they're two completely different things. You see, what happens is we get into this with our family members. It's like, well, I'm not going to forgive them because what they did was wrong. It's morally wrong. Shouldn't have done that. You think that their behavior is right or wrong. That's got nothing to do with it. You see, when you hold on to it, it impacts you. When you don't choose to forgive, that impacts you, not them. It impacts you. You're the one who holds on to it. You're the one who puts all that weight in your proverbial backpack and it slows you down. The same thing happens here. Well, it just becomes another guilt or shame mechanism for you to make yourself wrong. You learn integrity. I'm a bad person if I don't keep my word. Well, no, there's just a certain impact of that. The impact is, well, you lose the trust of that person. People are going to stop listening, which is what you did with your mum. She broke her word. She lost the listening. It's as simple as that. That's not right or wrong. That's just an impact. Because right or wrong is just a story. Does that help with that?
Yeah, I think it's just like learning to accept the impact.
That's what we go back to, because if we go back to, see if we've got one here. Yep, nailed it. Here, when we're choosing and taking responsibility, we're just accepting it. That's what we're doing. We're accepting the impact comparative to making it wrong or right. So when we do it, we're choosing the impact of it. We're not choosing whether it's right or wrong. We're choosing the impact. Because if we're going down that path, then that's what we're choosing. We're choosing the impact. That's not to say that impact is right or wrong, because all day, every day, we sabotage ourselves. So we're choosing the impact of that, whether we're aware of it or not. We choose the impact of being in our child archetype. We choose that impact. We choose that payoff. Make sense?
Yeah.
Brooke, what do you take out of all of that?
Been a lot of collapsing going on, man. Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay.
Is it? Is it okay? Okay is neutral. Could be perfect, whole, and complete if you want.
Yep. It's definitely given me some direction to complete some stuff.
Such as?
Oh, it's all the little stuff from over Christmas, really.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So what do you got to complete with your mum?
Nothing really stands out. The only thing that does stand out is scared me a little bit, because the other night when Sarah and I had a bit of a row, I packed a bag to get to walk out. That's what my mum used to do to my dad whenever they had an argument. So as you were talking, that's probably why might have been a bit distant before when you were talking, because it just scared me a little bit. It was kind of like looking in the mirror of my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And the worst part about that is that I would never purposely do anything to hurt Sarah, but I know that she's got abandonment issues that she's opening up to me about her past, how her dad used to walk out all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever things got tough. So obviously that's what she was upset about. She's like, that if you threatened to walk out, that I had abandonment issues about that, and you still chose to do it. But then in the moment, it wasn't until she mentioned it that I was like, oh man, fuck. But in the moment, I wasn't like, you know what? I don't know how I'm going to get her. So that's pretty nice.
That's the thing. We don't go out of our way to go and hurt people. Very rarely. The whole point is we create our coping mechanism. And where do we learn that from?
From our parents.
Jess,
Yep.
what do you got for me?
Just, yeah, well, as you said that, I was just thinking, God, yeah, absolutely. My coping mechanisms, I learned a lot from my dad, heaps.
Mm-hmm. What'd you learn from your dad?
Drinking is a coping mechanism that I have relied on in the past before. And I sort of define when I get stressed, it's sort of like one of the default answers, and I'm aware of it. But yeah, now that you brought it to my attention, I'm like, yeah. Over the Christmas period, when I was sort of handling a lot of different emotions, I realised I drank a lot more than I usually would.
And that's the thing. Everyone ends up being their parents' child. And people get to choose if that pattern continues or it stops with you. So that means you can choose to drink to cope, or you can choose to walk out to cope. So, Brooke, what's incomplete with your mum?
She's fucking crazy bitch. No.
Really, Mr. Entertainer.
Yeah, what's wrong with that, mate? Did it make you smile?
Do you love your mum unconditionally? Do you call someone a crazy bitch who you love unconditionally?
No.
Yeah. So the joke is just the cover for the pain.
Yeah. Her passion brought a lot of drama to the house. She was passionately bold.
Drama or excitement? You choose. It's your story, mate. You're the one telling it. You get to write it.
Yeah, it was always with intentions of creating excitement, but then when there was resistance from my dad, it would not be. She'd be trying to create excitement for us, but she would have to go through it. And
Sounds like story to me.
she would fight for anything.
Sounds like story to me.
Well, she just argued a lot, yelled a lot.
Is yelling a story?
No, that's why I tried to say it was like passionate.
The whole point is, how do we get back to the point of no emotion around it? She spoke in the house. She did things in the house.
Oh, she's like the fighter of the house, but not like a fighter as in like wanting to pick an argument, but she would just fucking stand by anything she believed in. She would like, you know, like she was.
Story.
What was that? You cut out.
Still story. Still story.
Oh, I don't know how to put it. She's just like.
No, the whole point is you go into the emotion of it. You haven't separated what happened from the story because you're in the emotion of it. You see it as all the same. Create separation of the story. What happened was your mum was the way that she was. She spoke. She did things. She didn't do things. She was the way that she was. That is it. You start creating, she was loud, she was all of these things. You add any adjective, story. And the whole point is, all of that story is just your perception, your virtual reality, your story that you've created around it. Because I guarantee your brother, your dad, and your sister would all have different stories. So which one's right? Which one of those stories is right?
Well, they're all based on your perception, aren't they?
No, none of them are right. None of them ever happened.
Yeah.
None of them ever happened. None of them ever happened. It's all story. It never happened. That's it. Never happened. And when it never happened, how long does it take to disappear? The reality is, what happened was your mum was the way that she was. Sarah is the way that she is. Jess's mum is the way that she is. And when you bring unconditional love to the way that someone is, and you actually experience them without the need to change them. And when you let go of the need to change them, then they can actually step into the higher self themselves. Even if they're no longer with you, the whole point is you've created this huge story that you've bought into, that you've lived your entire life by, making her wrong, which just means that it creates a coping mechanism for you to justify not loving her unconditionally. And when you let go of the wish, the want, the crave, the desire for it to be any other way, and you come from a place of unconditional love, well, then that starts to show up in your life. That also comes from owning that you created those stories. And what do we do to own those stories?
take responsibility.
And how do we do that? Now, this person is no longer with us. You know what you do?
No.
Write a letter.
Yeah.
You write out all of the stories that you created. You write out the impact of it. You write out what you're committed to now, or the impact of that is, because you live through that memory of that person, regardless of whether they're alive or not. So the process remains the same. You then get to go through it, whether they're with us or not. I'll post these in the group again. Because it's the same as whether it's with your mum, Jess, or whether it's with Sarah, Brooke, and with your mum. It's the same process. Creating completion comes from owning a story that you've created, that you lived your life by. Otherwise, it's just incomplete. So this becomes your opportunity to create healing of that inner child mechanism of yours, to allow you to start to show up as an adult in those areas, because there's incompletions there which are holding you back from stepping into the possibility of being that adult. For you to really begin to step into what you want to create in the future takes acknowledging the past and completing it. If it's incomplete, then you just drag it around with you. So, homework. Make some phone calls. Get complete. I would recommend do one straight after this. Sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll be a bit harsh on my old man because I've just been pushing all on him.
Oh, I know. Send me the letter when it's written.
Yeah.
Anything else from me?
Oh, that was good.
Thanks, Freddie.
You are most welcome.
Not big year in 2019, eh? It's my perception of it anyway.
Yeah, it's a good story. All right. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thanks, Cody.
Nice. Talk to you soon.
Yeah.